Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of the Australia Capital Territory in Australia, or the ACT, the Australia Capital Territory. As the name implies, this is the capital of Australia, which technically is the city of Canberra, that is how it is pronounced. It's not Canberra, it's Canberra. And two, the capital is not Sydney, it's not Melbourne, it's Canberra. It's one of those, it's like Ottawa in Canada. Like, you would think of like 3 or 4 or 5 other cities before you hit the actual capital. It's one of those. Canberra is the capital of Australia, if you did not know. And as you can see, this whole region here is sectioned off as part of the ACT. This is really the only city area. The rest is beautiful, beautiful national park. Mostly the Namadgi National Park. I hope that's how you pronounce it. It's very beautiful and very mountainous because this is part of the Great Dividing Range here in eastern Australia, where you can find the highest peaks on the continent. Mount Kosciuszko is just a hop, skip, and a jump away. It's the highest peak in Australia. And it's all very beautiful and lovely, like all of Australia's national parks. Very lush, very, very pretty. We'll check it out on the tablet. Sorry, I'm distracted by the bird that started singing outside. It is almost 4 in the morning when I'm filming this, and this bird just woke up and is singing their song, so if you can hear that, I apologize. It's very sweet. Canberra is situated along the Molonglo River. Again, I hope I'm pronouncing that right too. Feel free to correct me down in the comments if I mispronounce anything too offensively, I guess. If it's so bad you need to fix it, please do. But since this is the tiniest little part of Australia, not counting some of the various islands in the Pacific and Indian Ocean, it's very tiny compared to the rest of Australia. You can see it's surrounded by New South Wales, and it's an interesting little history as to why Canberra is the capital. So before I jump ahead, let's start at the beginning, because of course this area has been inhabited for a very, 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 very long time. I read that one of the estimates for human habitation in the ACT was about 25,000 years ago, but it could have been even earlier, for all we know. And of course, it was settled by the Aboriginal Australians, or first Australians, I think is the more politically correct term for the indigenous peoples of Australia. It wasn't until the 1820s that the British, the Europeans, began entering what's now the ACT. Of course, they had made settlements along the coast, and they had started expeditions more further into the interior. And the first settlement in what's now Canberra was constructed in 1824. Like most of Australia, they were building ranches. You have all of this space for your cattle or your sheep or whatever animal you were herding to roam and graze. And it remained just a little quaint area, nothing too important, until 1898. So at this point, Australia is deciding that they are going to become their own country within the Commonwealth, still associated with the United Kingdom, just not a colony anymore. They're going to be their own thing. So a lot of decisions had to be made before that would happen in 1901. And one of them was, where's the capital going to be? And of course, people in Sydney were like, well, it has to be Sydney. This was the first city. This is the most important place, blah, blah, blah. And people down here in Melbourne were like, well, it's obviously Melbourne. We have the huge Port Phillip Bay you can see there. It used to be called Port Phillip. It's now Melbourne. And, it's just a better location. And from what I heard, the politicians from both cities, I guess territories or colonies at that point, because they weren't states yet, were getting like physically violent over what city should be the capital. Like, it wasn't just arguments back and forth. It was getting rough. So they came to an agreement that they would pick a place in the middle between both cities, and they settled on Canberra. And Canberra was officially announced as the planned capital city in 1913. Next, they had to build a capital city. You need a lot of things in a capital city. Of course, you need your parliament, your seat of government. You need a place for your president / prime minister, whoever you have running your country, to live and work. You need embassies. It's also a great place for museums, memorials, gardens, things like that. So there's many beautiful planned cities around, planned capital cities around the world. Like Washington, D.C. at this point was probably one of the gold standards. There'd be many, many more to come after this. Brasilia comes to mind. But they wanted a beautifully planned city, so they worked very hard with many different architects. They held contests for who got to design what, and plans were implemented. People dropped out, people dropped in. World wars happened that delayed projects, 2 of them in fact. And eventually the city was completed in the early 1960s, which apparently was very embarrassing at some parts of the history, that it took so long to get the city built just so. But it is gorgeous. It is a lovely little planned city in their central area. It looks absolutely lovely. It does remind me a bit of Brasilia. I mean, nothing can be compared to Brasilia, to be honest, but it has that very specific stylized layout. And I'll show you when we head to the tablet in a minute. You'll see what I mean. A couple of other little news tidbits. In the summer of 2019 to 2020, because of course Australia's summers are over the New Year in December, right? That was the Black Summer. The wildfires in Australia were horrendous, and about 80% of the Magdi National Park went up in flames. It's very sad. I know a lot of forests rely on fires as a natural way to regrow, but not to that extent, right? It was a very, very hot summer in the Northern Hemisphere months earlier. When I lived in California, we had horrendous wildfires, and a few months later, once summer hit the Southern Hemisphere, it was even hotter, and Australia was very, very devastated by wildfires that year. But in more recent news, Canberra announced that they are working with New South Wales to change the border of the ACT because they are running out of space for houses. And they want to build a lot more homes and need more space. So without encroaching into a different state, they want to change the borders, and that seems to be something that they're working on currently. We'll have to keep an eye on that, because I know Melbourne just changed their borders last year, and they officially became the largest city in Australia by population and area. Of course, it was Sydney before. They changed their borders and became the biggest. So fact, by the way, if you really want to zing someone, what's the most populous city in Australia? It's Melbourne now. As of a couple months ago, it's now Melbourne. So Canberra is probably going to get the same treatment soon to expand the city limits further into New South Wales so that they can have more room to expand. It's also very, like most major cities in Australia, very large population of Southeast Asian immigrants. They have a big Lunar New Year festival, I want to say, and a big multicultural festival, I want to say it's called, where they kind of celebrate all the cultures that, live in Australia, whether Indigenous or an immigrant culture, which is a great festival to have in a capital city. But let's head over to the tablet because there are so many things to see in Canberra and so many more in the surrounding area. I didn't realize. I really thought the ACT was just like this. I didn't realize just how big it was before researching this. And I mean, it's not very big at all compared to the rest of Australia, but it's bigger than I thought it was going to be. So let's go check it out. It's so beautiful. Let's get going. Here we are, the ACT. Let's start by zooming out so you can see exactly where we are in the world. Here's Australia, the island continent of Australia. Just real quick, I'm going to say this in tomorrow's video because I already filmed it. Don't forget to ask me. But Australia is not a continent per se. It's a continental island, right? Just like how this is an island, right? It's a body of a land surrounded by a body of water. This is an island, right? It's surrounded by water. Antarctica is an island, right? An island. It's a continental island. It's way too big to be considered an island, so it's a continental island. So, whereas Australia, it's not its own continent, because then what continent is New Zealand a part of? It's part of Oceania, but it's on its own continental island, if that makes any sense. So you call Australia a continent, you don't call it an island, even though people try to say, well, blah, 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 Australia is the largest island. It's a continental island. It's not an island, per se. But anyway, you can see just how mountainous the Great Dividing Range is. Called that because on one side the rivers flow this way, the other side the rivers flow that way. It's dividing it. Very, very mountainous, especially down here in the south. And let's start off in the city and we'll end it in the beautiful nature. You can see the big urban sprawl here, and you can very clearly see the center of the city, all planned and beautiful. Look at the Parliament House. Have you ever seen the Parliament of Australia before? Isn't that a remarkable design? How clever. Look at all of the green, like it's a Teletubbies house. Let's look at an actual picture of it. Let's see. What's a good slideshow to pick? Australia, Canberra Parliament House. Oh, we don't want the inside, we want the outside. Parliament House. Very beautiful design. There's the inside. It's pretty cool inside too, but it's a gorgeous outside. There it is in Lego. It's still very modern, even though it was built not too recently, right? It still looks very modern, very classy. Quite timeless, I think. Of course, lots of beautiful art and sculptures. There's Queen Elizabeth II. Tiny area. It's a very beautifully designed building surrounded by this nice ring road with all kinds of greenery and park. There's a big mall here that leads to all kinds of sites. there's the old Parliament House that they used before this was constructed. It leads out to the river here. All kinds of beautiful museums. There's the National Library. Beautiful gardens. I'm picking and choosing what to show you guys because there's so much to look at here. I highly encourage you to play around Canberra on your own because there's a ton to see. I just realized I'm still set to everything after the last video. I don't want to show you all the supermarkets. You don't need to see that. Important cathedrals here. Railway museum. Railroads are a big part of Australia's history and, you know, modern times as well, just as important. Here's the National Museum of Australia. Let's start there. Let's look around. The National Museum. We've got some dinosaurs, of course. Classic cars. Most of the slideshow is the really cool modern architecture, not so much the displays. It's a cool camper, though. I wouldn't mind having something like that. But really beautifully designed building. Old windmill. There's a croc. That's a big one, too. Beautifully designed exterior. Wow. Traditional boat. Some orcas. Some indigenous art. Lots of indigenous art. Isn't this incredible? Look at these little guys here. Their little faces. That's pretty neat. I wish I could read this and see what these were used for. If it's just art or if they're for ceremonial purposes. Yeah, very lovely, very cool, modern building. There's the Science Museum as well. But probably the most important place that I saw in my research was that the Australian War Memorial is like the most important place to visit. Beautiful stained glass there of the soldiers from various wars, I think. And it is a huge structure. Look at this dome. How beautiful. So Art Deco, but so shiny and bright like the sun. Because usually, you know, a war memorial is a statue, a plaque, something or other. This is a whole complex. You can put your poppies there. Along the names. And lots of cool dioramas there. There's the Gallipoli donkey fighting with the Anzac soldiers in World War I. It's a beautiful statue there, doesn't it say? It's a whole complex to learn about the struggles and conflict that many Australians lived through, defending their country. I'm sure that's the grave of the unknown soldier. Look at that guy, that's huge. I think this shoot down aircraft for the doggos. Their name liveth forevermore. It's a beautiful structure. Some old memorabilia. Very big, cool airplane. Look at the wings, how they fold up. I didn't know you could do that. That's pretty neat. Let's see. What else do I have to show you? There are two mountains here. You can see. And maybe this is one of them. Actually, I think it's these two. I'm not sure about that one. But the name Canberra comes from an Aboriginal word that I didn't write down because I have no idea how to pronounce it, but it sounds like Canberra. And it means breasts. It means cleavage because of these two mountains. So pretty much Canberra, it means breasts in a way. Observatory. I know that NASA has an observatory, but I don't think it's this one. NASA has an observatory somewhere just outside Canberra. I didn't bother trying to find it because I didn't think it would have an interesting slideshow, but how interesting that I found a different one. Let's see. Make sure I'm facing the right way. let's take a look at the nature. Let's start off in Namadgi, which again I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And look how stunning. See, I wonder if that's some of the damage from the fire there. But it's very forested, very lovely. Look at this cool rock. There's a lot of cool rocks in Australia. It's kind of got that brushy, woodsy feeling. It reminds me of when I was in Arizona and I was in the forests around the Grand Canyon. Now there's the Qantas flight going by. How it's, very green, very lush, but it still has like a dry, deserty feeling to it. There's a koala. Oh, I want to go to Australia so bad. There's a wallaby, right? That's not a kangaroo. I think that's a wallaby. Yeah, those are wallabies. Gibraltar rocks. They show you how to find scat. You don't want to step in that, I suppose. You can see all of the mountains here. Let's check out the Barumba rocks. I'll tell you a story. Not really a story, just a tidbit about my channel. Was the series that I'm doing almost didn't happen. I was very prepared to, instead of doing every region, because I thought that's too impossible, to do every national park in the world. So I sat down and started making lists of every country's national park. And, some countries only have 2 or 3 because they're small. I think America has around 40 or so, like official national parks. Canada had probably around 50 or 60 or so. Australia has like 600 and probably more now. I saw Australia and went, oh no, like this is a problem. My whole channel is just going to be Australia, which that's not a bad thing. It's just like every 3rd video would be about Australia. And it's not that I'm against Australia, it's just that I'm against talking about one country over and over and over again, even if it is beautiful. So I scrapped that idea and I said, I guess we'll do each region, even though that's going to take so long and be so hard. I guess that's what I'm doing. Thanks, Australia. But honestly, kudos to Australia for making the majority of its landmass into national park so that it is protected forever. Nothing can ever damage this environment. At least man can't damage this environment, right? It is protected. This is Fitz's hill. Fitz, why do you get to have this hill? It's Fitz's bike. It's Fitz's posts. Fitz's road, and this is Fitz's street. Fitz's clouds. Fitz's fence. It's Fitz's. What else? Geiger Line Nature Reserve. Look at this. Oh, it's much drier, it looks like. Which is strange because we're not too far from the ocean, right? Let's see, there's so much to see. There's the Gibraltar Falls that we saw that sign for. Beautiful. Gibraltar Falls. That's gorgeous. Would you swim in this water? I don't know if I would. It looks a little sus. The Tidbinbilla Special Purpose Reserve. That's the other thing, is that Australia has like 10 different kinds of national parks. This is the golden wattle. That's the national flower of Australia. Isn't it pretty? There's a koala eating some eucalyptus. There's a platypus. Is that real? That looks fake. That's not real. That's not a real platypus. That's a real bird. That's a koala. Pretty. I don't think that was a real platypus. No way. Let's look at, you know what? Let's look at the National Zoo before we go. I have not seen the slideshow. I don't know what to expect. Giraffe. Cheetah. emu. Or it looks like an emu. Do you know that cheetahs can purr? The largest cat that can purr. A beautiful rhino. Looks like a white rhino. Some more wallabies. Zebra. Peacock. Iguana. A little meerkat. Penguins. Those look like blue fairy penguins, which you can find in southern Australia. I love penguins. I went through a penguin phase as a child. I learned all the penguins. They're called little blues or little fairies or little blue fairies. It probably depends where you are. That is some kind of marsupial. I'm not sure what that is. It's a wonderful koala. Some hyenas or spotted dogs. I'm not quite sure from the back. Some tiny crocs. Those are babies. Those are juveniles for sure. Some more lovely cheetahs. What is that? A bush baby, I think. A lion. Very cool. Oh my goodness. Is that some kind of parrot? What is this thing? Holy moly. That is a fish if I ever saw one. Okay. I just really wanted to see the zoo, because of course the Sydney Zoo is world famous, one of the best zoos in the world. I wanted to see the National Zoo. Let's just look at the slideshow of Canberra as we end the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing, and you really should, because next we're going to France. You're not going to want to miss the beautiful French Alps. So be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational. I hope the bird outside isn't too loud. And if it is, I hope it wasn't too distracting. It's still going. And I hope that you have a good night. Good night. Good night.